Welcome back to episode 2 of the Montana Grizzly Leadership Project. Today's guest just finished her 8th season as head coach and 15th overall with the program, that program being the Montana Grizzly volleyball team. She currently guides a squad that had been at the bottom of the Big Sky Conference to one that now regularly qualifies for the conference tournament and is a contender for the league title every year. In the 2022 season, she was named Big Sky Conference Coach of the Year. Allison Lawrence, welcome to the MGLP.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right.
So excited.
All right. We appreciate you being here. Yeah. So, origin story time a little bit. You were a standout player at Oregon State. Go Beavers. Right? One of the top outside hitters in Beavers history. You finished your career ranked 5th in OSU history for kills, 7th for digs, and 10th for service aces. You played for Nancy Samara. Now, what in her coaching style resonated for you, and what did you take from her in terms of your kind of leadership and coaching progression and development?
Mm-hmm. Nancy was a force, and she's an interesting leadership example for me personally because we couldn't have more opposite personalities and ways of being in the world. And so a lot of my experience of Nancy and playing for Nancy as an athlete was trying to, not always in a negative way, but edit the parts of myself that felt really undesirable in her eyes in terms of leadership traits. For example, I'm very introverted, not very dominant in terms of my personality, not very direct in terms of my communication style, and, kind of a leader by example rather than kind of this like verbal in-your-face leader, which is what she was,
okay.
Both as a player and a coach. And I think lots of reasons for that. Who she is, authentic to her, which is why I think it was so effective for her, but also she was one of the only women head coaches in the Pac-10 at the time, at a time in the NCAA for women's volleyball where there weren't that many head women's volleyball coaches who were women, especially as you went up the levels. So I think that model worked for her, and then and it was terrifying for me at the same time. And so I learned a ton. One of the hardest workers I've ever witnessed, and could jump in at any drill, anytime, post having 2 kids, and could just destroy all of us. And that was kind of a tactic of hers, of if she needed a drill to sort of make you feel it a little bit, she'd be like, all right, see if you can ace me, go, you have 5 serves type thing. And she'd always win, and we knew that we were being set up to lose in those situations. But just a force. And so I think such an example of boldness, of confidence, of kind of that ball busting, like I'm gonna come out swinging in every room that I'm in, and I'm in a lot of male systems and male dominated rooms, and so like this is how you do it, ladies, type thing. And I think the tough pieces for me was that I think I internalized through some of my years that I wasn't cut out to be a leader, because I really couldn't imagine myself being as volatile as she was. And so I learned a lot. I was inspired, and I think there was also this flavor and this sort of residual feeling of like, I just don't think I can do it that way. So there was some self-doubt built into that as I was thinking like, I want to be like her, but I don't think I can. So yeah, I think it was a mixed thing that I'm so thankful for. But yeah, I've never met anyone like her since then.
Interesting. I mean, we end up being byproducts of the leaders that we have, and sometimes that's because we wouldn't do it the way that they did, and other times we're grabbing onto those things that they're doing that we really that do work for us. And obviously, you were able to process all that and play really, really well. I mean, when you think about those statistics in terms of where you're at, somehow from a performance standpoint, it got you. It helped get you to a pretty high level.
Yeah, I think that, that model, and I don't pretend to know that model in and out, but in that model, your directions are pretty clear. It's pretty directive. You've got, on top of the hierarchy, you've got the boss, and then the boss's instructions are rigorous, but they are very clear, and you know what's going to happen to you if you step out of line. But if you do what you're told, you're going to be kind of a good little soldier in that way. You know what I mean? And she ran a tight ship in that way. And my personality as a people pleaser is like, what do you want from me? Cool. I can give you that times 1,000. I could run through a wall. I'm a hard worker. And so it was easy for me to know what she wanted in terms of output. And that was the safest part of that kind of structure for me, is like, I know what my directions are and I can just go do it and I can run at it. And I can be like a good follower in that way. So those were the things that I think felt good about it. And then I think the way I lead my program now is almost the exact opposite of that. So clearly at some point that just doesn't feel authentic to me, which, we can talk about as everything keeps going, but I think it fit her, and that's why it was so believable too.
Yes, it just matched her values and
Yeah.
how she approached the world.
Totally. And it was very consistent. I think it's extremely, I said scary before because it was intimidating and it was intense, but I think I shouldn't have used the word scary or frightening, because I think that only comes into play when it's inconsistent, when you just don't know, what is going to trigger a coach. But if their view makes sense and is consistent and it's explained, and then their triggers are the same every time and they blow up the same way every time for the same drop in standard, it's like, all right, I just threw a chair last time, I missed that ball, but I get it.
Not surprised if
throw
it
any
happens
chairs.
again. Yeah.
But metaphorically.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, in your journey as a coach, then, when you moved past your playing times, you were an assistant at several different places, Montana included. So what was it like in that transition of moving from an assistant's role into the head coaching role? Because that's a pretty massive jump.
Yeah, it is. And I think in coaching it's so funny because there's no formal education for coaches. I mean, there's some certificates you can get that teaches you about the rules of the game and things like that. But, I was a philosophy major. It's not like I majored in anything that screamed coach necessarily. And I think when you played, that there's some avenues for you to just get a job based on your relationships with the coaches you had or the players you played with, which is how I landed this job here. And it's assumed if you played, you kind of know how to teach, but you don't really get to try on teaching unless you've coached some club teams or whatever. And I had done some of that, but you're largely like, I think when you start out, you're coaching the way that you were coached and you're teaching what you were taught, and you're largely teaching like, this worked for me, so it'll probably work for you, in terms of technique and feel and kind of, tactics and all that stuff. So I think as an assistant, you can stay stuck in that holding pattern for a long time of this worked for me and I'm going to just keep regurgitating that. Or you hopefully, I say hopefully because I think this is the way it should be done, but you evolve based on learning other models, other leadership models, other program models, other like ways of teaching technique and tactics. And your players are your guinea pigs in a way. You try things on, see what works, see what doesn't. And you turn into a coach and you have a coach identity versus just having a player identity, and coaching from a place that uses a lot of statements like, well, when I was a player, we did this, and so we're going to do this. And I don't remember the exact moment, but I remember this sort of gradual shift of thinking more like that, and wanting to grow in those areas versus just wanting to compare everything to who I was or what I learned, or the style of volleyball my team played. And I played in college, but I didn't play pro. I didn't play for a national team like both of our assistants did here. And so I didn't have a lot of other models to look at. I just came up through one. So I think it was really important for me to learn on a lot of different levels, all the ways you could do things differently. And then to get to know myself enough to know what that might look like. And then I think the last kind of big piece is that, as an assistant, at first you think like, oh, it's my job to figure out who I would be as a head coach. And that's probably part of it. You're going to always developing that voice in your head.
Mm-hmm.
But largely your number one job is to make the head coach look good. Like that's your job. And I think that's a hard ego thing to do. And that's a really delicate, intricate dance between you and someone you work for. That it's your job kind of behind closed doors to not be a yes person and to push and to, present differing opinions and to be creative and thoughtful and critical. And then when we are out in public and when we are in front of the team, you are all about supporting what the top person's vision is. And that takes a lot of thoughtfulness and time, I think, to do really well. So, yeah.
That's interesting. I've never heard that before. And if I'm tracking you correctly, then you said it sounds like when you first came into that assistance role, you were approaching it more from a player's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point, you started assuming a coach's identity,
Yeah.
and that something changed then when
Yeah.
that happened.
Yes.
And I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
But that totally makes sense.
Yeah, I think, and it's been this way hiring assistants too. You hear, and some are kind of frame things that way more often of, well, when I was a player, and you hear it a lot in frustrations of like, I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I can't do. Still to this day, there's a lot of that kind of posturing that I think is really toxic. I think no player is motivated by like if their coach can do the rep that they're I don't
Oh, that
cool,
helped. Yeah.
But ultimately that doesn't matter. And I think underneath all of that, like the real goal and what I needed to get over is my identity as a player. I think like those are fond memories and they were instructive and I learned a lot. But I was shocked at how useless that information was for me as a coach, really. And then when it started to feel that shift happened and it started to open up into this, wow, there's all these ideas and, training tactics and schools of thought and things that I never would have gone into as a player that now I get to explore as a coach, as someone who's in charge of organizing a team environment for other people. That's where the joy is now. It's not, none of that lies in my memories or experiences as a player. And I think the faster you go through that, the better.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that until it was already kind of happening. And then just sort of, you see someone that hasn't gone through that and you're like, oh man, if I was a player, that'd be annoying to just hear that voice all the time, not to speak negatively of it, but you just like, you can't get stuck there, in my opinion, or else you just stunt your growth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then with two assistants, is that something that you see often, especially in the youngest or the whoever the most junior assistant is? I would assume that oftentimes is a person who just played.
Yes, and there's enormous strength in that, especially the fact that they've just played
To bridge whatever that is between coach and current players.
Yes, exactly. And there's such an example, in women's sports, it's like, if you want to be her, you need to see her type thing. It's like this, this example of, hey, this woman is just a little bit further down the road than me. And so there's some weight to her perspective where you're like, she just went through what I went through, so there's, I don't want to discount that coach speaking from that place of like, hey, I learned this as an athlete and this is me a little bit just having just finished and this is me sharing this with you. So there's so much nuance there, and I think there's so much powerful, like it is so powerful to be an example, and yet there's, to me, there's an evolution as you take on responsibility as a trainer on the court, as a teacher of the game, that you kind of slough off that identity too. And you do see that, and I think everyone has to go through it. And I think it also helps the process when you're a young female coach that's similar to the ages of your female athletes, and I can't speak for the men's side, but I'm assuming it would be the same, where you're trying to earn respect. You're trying to remove yourself from them as a peer and not just be seen as, well, you're kind of like my captain. You're like kind of my coach, but you're my cool coach. You're my big sister. You hear those things a lot. And I don't think that helps the development of young coaches either. And I don't think that garners the respect they deserve from the team. There should be a line.
There is a firewall of some sort.
And so I think it starts, there's little moments of wisdom, I think advice giving is kind of similar, where it's a pretty fraught thing where you're like, advice is good and it assumes I know what's best for you, so there's some of that where it's like, I don't know. I just think there's moments for them to share who they were as a player because it helps the team, but I think ultimately that transition does happen in their first couple of years. And if they get stuck, then I think you can see that backfire with the team. The team starts to see through some of that stuff and it becomes your ego versus what we're doing in a way that feels a little bit inauthentic and just kind of, I don't know.
Glory days. Yeah.
Yeah, glory days. Yeah, those things. I was like,
it was so much better when I played. Yeah.
Yeah, especially if that coach played at a level that was much greater than, then it just becomes like really toxic.
Yes.
But I know we've had fabulous coaches that did that transition really well. And you don't, that doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. And yeah, but just being in coaching, you see certain coaches that are just starting out flounder or not be able to stay in it because I just don't think their identity develops in a way where they can kind of stay in the game or kind of work their way up through the coaching ranks, whether they want to be a head coach or not,
Yes.
So they have to go through their developmental stages too, and if they don't, like, what player is going to be like, I can't wait to show up for my 35-year-old coach who's like essentially my age emotionally.
Still thinks she's playing.
Yeah. So I think players see right through that.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Big question, maybe not even a fair question, but what would you say your leadership style is? I mean, as a philosophy major, and the fact that we've talked about this some before this recording is what
Yeah.
I know you have a clear idea of what that is.
I do, and it's I think if we were lightning rounding this and it's like just one word for your coaching style, I would say collaborative. And I think that just like goes out into, a system that at its core is collaborative for lots of different reasons. But I think that's the big word that I would use to describe. It's definitely congruent to my personality. I generally assume that I'm, to put it kind of in a crude way, the dumbest person in the room. Like I want and I need other thoughts and other thinkers in the room. I love, and I think that's the philosophy training maybe, of just, you see other people's arguments and other people's logic as a strengthening of your own, or it's great to, deliberate on those things. And that produces to me the best, most coherent kind of way of being in philosophy and that kind of thing. And so, I think I'm not a big hierarchical person. I think that has some roots for me in feminist theory as well. And noticing, like, being a female coach and being a woman in the world and coaching people who are women, hierarchies don't always serve like women's interests or have women at the top of those hierarchies. We aren't always trained, or I shouldn't say trained, given opportunities to be leaders in that way and try those things on. And so I want our program and I want our staff to be a place where anyone can lead from any moment. And sometimes as the head coach, I am following an assistant. Sometimes I'm following the team. To me, it should be this fluid thing that kind of moves in this way. It stretches and, contracts and then expands depending on what the situation is. And what voice I think elevates us to be our strongest at that point, or what group of voices. And I don't want to be too abstract or get into the weeds and anything, so just like poke holes in it. But yeah, I think that's what's at the core of things for me, and then and is authentic to who I am, for lots of reasons. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it doesn't always have to be the head coach that is the person leading everything.
I don't think
that's
so.
That's just sounds exhausting in some ways.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think part of that's really exciting to me with the players, you hear a lot of this, like, we want to be a player-led program. And I say that. But I think if you're saying that, you better take that pretty seriously, meaning that there are moments that you have to authentically choose to have your players lead, meaning you follow what they say, and you have to follow through. And I do believe, I have one more point on that remind me to come back to.
Okay.
But I believe that a stronger group, the group will be at its strongest if people feel the most responsible for it. So if you and me are a team, if you have no responsibilities within our team and you're just following my lead and my orders, I don't know that it tugs at your heart as much as it would if I said, what kind of team do you want to be on, and what means the most to you, and how do you want to hold your part of this up, and you feel the weight and the responsibility of that. I think we do that with intimate relationships, with partners, with family, depending on your family. Families are interesting. But you know what I mean? I think there's this piece of giving and sharing responsibility that builds cohesion. And that's such a big part to me of why I love coaching, why I love teams, and the type of leader I want to be. And I don't have all the answers, and I need other people to succeed. I think that's such a beautiful thing of team sports is you have to sort of relinquish this control over your own destiny kind of a thing. You have to say, I really need other people to get where I want to go. And I think that's such a beautiful metaphor for being a citizen in a community, to being a person in the world. And I do firmly, so much of me wants our team environment to mirror how I would want us to be people outside of our team, and be responsible to other people. So I think the thing I was going to say earlier
okay.
to come back to it is, when we took over, we meaning Dana and I, Oli wasn't here yet, but Dana, our associate head coach, and I took over the program in 2017. The culture was not great, meaning our priorities were way out of whack. And we slowly but surely instituted these player-led kind of values and characteristics, and gave a lot of responsibility, sometimes to athletes before they were ready, where they weren't exactly holding it the way that they needed to for us to succeed. But it was that exchange and that trust, it's the ultimate form of love and trust to me, to say something, I'm going to make this thing that I love vulnerable I'm going to be vulnerable because I'm going to make it vulnerable to your actions. Like, your actions can mess this up.
Yeah.
Can enhance it,
Mm-hmm.
And so in the act of giving that, I think more people step up to the plate than not. And that's what we had. We had that slowly change. And those that were really invested wanted a piece of it, and they wanted to take care of the program. And then we kind of marched forward like that and went forward. So I don't know. I hope I answered your question.
No, absolutely, because it tied into the next question, which is that sometimes a coach has the good fortune of coming into a winning culture, mm-hmm. where they've been winning. Mm-hmm. Maybe the head coach moves on because they have been winning to something else, and probably something bigger. And so now somebody has to step in to that culture, whether it's an assistant or somebody they brought in from outside. But that's good fortune, mm-hmm. in the sense that these kids know how to win already. That wasn't your journey, mm-hmm. coming here, moving from an assistant to taking over as the head coach. The culture was kind of truthfully fractured. Yeah. And that's a different path. That's, mm-hmm. a different journey. So what did that look like then, in terms of, there's some massive structural and organizational things we need to fix?
Yes. I think what I've learned the most about leadership and any kind of philosophy came out of that process. I mean, obviously your back's against the wall. You've been handed a festering pool of like nothing. And mm-hmm. It's like, well, fix everything.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Which I found so meaningful. And one of the things that I will, no matter what we do from here on out, feel the most proud of. And not in terms of me, but what those groups were able to do. But I think the thing that stuck with me is just how much leadership and a philosophy and a system and an environment really becomes itself, really comes into being because of the smallest adaptations, the smallest moments of adaptability in that. And I know like is it emotional flexibility, emotional adaptability? I don't know. Emotional agility, that's the word.
Okay.
There's like some buzzwords, people have written books about like how agile you are with your emotions, how much you can experience a stimulus, and then in that little gap between the stimulus and your response, you like have a wide variety of choices type thing. And learning like if our culture is really going to work and who I am as a leader is going to work, who Dana and I are as leaders is going to work, we are going to be made or broken in that gap between what happens, how we respond, and how that aligns with our values, and what we want to build. And not only just me and Dana, but our team. So
Yes.
to be able to sort of do that with people who, when we first took over, people who hadn't gotten it right or were in a system that was broken and fractured, like you say, can we actually change behavior with the same people based on this kind of model? And it was fascinating, and excruciating. The amount of trust and patience to just for the long game was really trying, for all of us. And I think we slowly drug ourselves out of the mud in that way. And so it required a lot of giving of responsibility, of, that John Wooden idea of catch 'em being good, like reinforce the good things that you want. There was some tightening up of like, okay, this is below standard, and if it happens, you're out of here. There was definitely you got to draw a line, in some of those ways. And so there were moments when I was very, the word's escaping me, but kind of in charge in the sense of like, this is the rule, and I don't care what you think about it, and you better follow it.
A more authoritarian
Yes,
kind of
thank you.
approach. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But largely, we wanted the cultural, there was some behavioral issues with that just had to be dealt with. But largely culturally, and, in terms of our habits and things like that, I wanted the athletes to feel like they were choosing things as much as we were. And so that's what we tried to do. And we failed in some ways. We excelled in other ways. And then I think the piece that really allowed it to work, and I love this with your conversation with Jason Brown, previously, is it had to be authentic to me when I'm executing that vision, and it had to be authentic to Dana, and we had to model that as leaders. It couldn't be inconsistent in our delivery and our example of that to our team. And so I'm an emotional person. I think this is an emotional experience, whether you're an athlete or a coach. And the team really needed to see that I was 100% emotionally invested. And I wanted the team to feel like if you are hurting the team, you are hurting me. If I am hurting the team, I am hurting you, type of a thing. It had to go that deep for me. And I think we showed that it did. And I think when you do that in combination with I care about you on that level, coach to athlete, I think some pretty magical things can happen. And some big behavior changes can happen, and also some big just inspiration of now I'm not just in a system and executing it. I'm a part of something I believe in, and that is just the best feeling in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like it would be challenging in the sense of that equation or that formula that you described of stimulus response with time in the middle. That time is a variable.
Yes.
And sometimes you have a lot of it to figure out what our response is going to be.
Yeah.
And other times you've got no time at all.
Yes.
And yet in those moments where you've got very little or no time before your response, those are going to be the most telling and the truest maybe reflection of who you are as a person, because that was an immediate response to something that happened, and that's going to let people know, oh, that's where she's at.
Totally.
Because she didn't have time to think about it.
Totally.
So how do you deal with that situation?
A lot of work with myself on, okay, you're going to be in situations where you don't have a lot of time, so not overly preparing of like that it's scripted when things happen. You're not like doomsday preparing.
Just waiting for that one.
Like,
yeah.
I can't wait for this situation. But I think it became easier. Like there were some clunky responses from me where I just didn't know, where I was just like, I need a minute. I don't know. And I didn't have a minute. Like, just like you're saying. But I think being forced to be in that situation, sometimes I would react and then have to apologize. I think that was a big deal.
Because the response wasn't maybe appropriate.
It wasn't great.
Yeah.
You know? But if I could come back and apologize and then be consistent with my behavior after, I think that was a decent model for them too. You know, sometimes you're on the court and you do something and you say something under pressure and you wish you didn't, and you have to be able to go to that teammate and say, hey, I was, too activated and I had to, like, now that I've thought, I want to apologize to you. So it took some modeling of that and some doing that. And then I think just as I lived in a lot of fear of things going wrong, even though it started out as everything going wrong. But I think for my personality, that's very sort of conflict averse and anxious. And yeah, just like an introvert in ways where you're like, okay, I might need to step up and be commanding in certain ways that are outside my comfort zone, and people are going to see me turn red, and people are going to see me be emotional and struggle with my words, and those kind of hiccups. I think I just had to go through that myself too, and the more I did it, the easier it got. Is it easy now? Do I hate it now? Yes. It's still not great.
End of season banquet.
Yeah, you were there. You saw all the tears. And those were good moments.
Yes.
Good things,
yes.
The harder parts.
But owning them at the same time, saying,
Yeah.
this is going to be tough for me, because
Yeah.
these ladies mean a lot to me, and I'm
Yes.
saying goodbye to them.
Yeah.
The seniors in particular.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think that those moments where you're making slight, immediate adjustments in real time, I think is just how your coach identity too gets formed over years and years, and why that experience gets easier. But a lot of self-reflection. I did a lot of journaling, and tried to just work on myself as much as I was asking other people to work on themselves, in ways to where that became, it wasn't necessarily more authentic, but I just got more confident, trusting that like my initial reaction is going to be in line and congruent with what I think and what I say. But yeah, there's so many moments in coaching where you're like, I just want a system where I build this structure, and then we just kind of hit it every day. Like I built out the entire spring, and we have this lesson today and this lesson tomorrow, and we're teaching passing, and then we're teaching attacking. And I think while that feels safe and nice, because the path rolls out before you and you just have to plan, and then you just kind of like check things off the list, I have found that I meet the needs of our team the best, and we build cohesion into what we're doing the best if I don't actually plan as far ahead, and I am in the moment and I'm able to adjust in the moment. The parts of that being the hardest are the ones that you're explaining, when it's like something's on fire, you gotta respond now, or in a game.
Challenging leadership moments.
Stuff. Yeah. And luckily I have a team, a team like staff. A lot of coaches don't have other staff members to go to in that way. And our staff is small, other coaches have larger staffs, but that's really great to be able to have people to be like, hey, you really messed that up, or what you did right there wasn't consistent with who you are, because we all need that. So.
But maybe at a high school level or a club level, you might not have that assistant.
You
don't. Yeah, and it's you.
It's you, or it's you and your captain. I mean, I think sometimes people are shocked that get a glimpse into our program how close I am with the players, and I don't mean close in the sense of I know what their dogs' names are and I don't mean that. I mean how much I share with them about what I'm feeling and thinking, which again is consistent with who I am, and so I think it's a good thing. But I've talked with other coaches that like I would never. That feels like you would be letting them in on too much, and they have a role and you have a role. And I don't think that's a wrong argument. I just think that it's been powerful for me, to really show a lot of who I am. I'm asking them to do the same. So
yes,
yeah, I've used them as, lighthouses and guiding lights in lots of ways too. Of like, I need some feedback on things.
Yeah. Help me help you.
Help me, yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. So
And so we had this discussion in pre-production where I had this question of, is it different coaching female athletes?
hmm
And then I sat with that for a while and I thought, well, I didn't ask that to Jason. I didn't
hmm
ask him what it's like to coach male athletes. And so part of that then is, I think, my own bias and my own kind of hang up of maybe too much interest in what is it like with full female staff coaching an all female team.
yeah,
But then we had this great discussion in pre-production about that very question
yeah,
and kind of landed on, let's talk about it,
yeah,
or at least let's poke it around a little bit and and
yeah.
see if there's any fruit on that tree.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you did and that we had that conversation. And it means so much to me to be able to talk about. And on the one hand, like, I can see the argument for, okay, let's stop calling them female athletes. They're athletes. Let's, because it feels a little bit like an asterisk always.
Mm-hmm.
Just, well, they're not lesser than, their accomplishments aren't in this different category. And I wholeheartedly believe that. I also think, I don't coach in a vacuum. Our players aren't people in a vacuum. They are women in the world. They identify as women out in the world, and they exist in our country. I don't have any international players, but if I did, they would exist outside in their own cultures and countries and things like that. But in our country, they exist in systems where they are marginalized. And I know the point of this podcast is not to talk about all the systems of inequality in our society, but I truly believe in this. Back to what I said in the beginning, that I coach women. I am a woman, and I think that the environment that we create together should equip my athletes with skills that they will need to navigate systems once they leave here, and do whatever they want. So,
Mm-hmm.
we can argue till the cows come home on nature, nurture. Are women more collaborative? Are they born leaders? All those
Mm-hmm.
debates that
Yeah.
people have, and that's really not even interesting to me. Like, it is, but it's not for this. Point being, like, there aren't as many women leaders. Let's just take the NCAA, for example. The higher you go up the chain of command, the less women there are. And that's just like white straight women, right? That's women with some other privileged identities too. So, there's less opportunity for leadership roles. I think we don't teach women when they're younger to deal with conflict, as the same as we do with men. And not to say women and men are the same in conflict. However, the amount of times on recruiting visits, I'll have a parent of a recruit say to me, "God, how do you deal with all these women? It just must be so catty all the time."
Mm-hmm.
Just so dismissive of how women learn how to deal with conflict and execute, conflict. And teams need productive conflict. If we all are just in harmony all the time and not pushing each other and not exchanging ideas or disagreeing on what would make the best team environment and the best team, we're doing a disservice to the potential of our group. And so, for all of those reasons, I want my philosophy. I keep saying mine, and it makes me uncomfortable. But I want our environment to be one where they are expected to be leaders. They, as in the athletes, they get to try on, they are learning critical thinking skills. They get to try on leadership roles in a safe environment where they can fail, come back, try again. Where, we're not making up for every societal disadvantage they're at, if they are, but we also are not pretending that those things don't exist. And so I think this question means so much to me. And as a woman in coaching, where, in our conference, there's 3 female head coaches out of, 10. And I think some struggles that are unique to women and other minority groups that our team environment should speak to. So, yeah, I don't, yeah.
That's probably fairly reflective of women's volleyball writ large in the coaching, in the gender
Yes.
imbalance, male female. It seems
Yes.
like there's a heck of a lot more male coaches
There are.
at the collegiate level than there are female coaches.
Yes, and you saw, especially in Title IX, is an interesting thing just in the NCAA. Since the enactment of Title IX, you saw a huge drop in female coaches of women's sports. And now that there's more money and more, there's just more and more money in collegiate sports, I think, those jobs are really competitive, and you're seeing some systems of inequality there too. And in terms of athletic directors, and SWAs are typically women, I think, always.
Yeah. Yeah.
But athletic directors and other administrative positions, where those trends haven't really budged. There's been some, for volleyball, there's been some efforts behind recruitment and retention, and some studies done on that. But it'll kind of rise and then be stagnant for a while. And so, I'd love for our athletes to see their coaches as dynamic, full people, not just as coach number 1, 2, and 3, but, I'm a mother, I'm an athlete, and I'm not really an athlete anymore, but I have other hobbies. You know what I was just saying?
Part of your identity, though. Yeah.
And I would like them to see me in a leadership position, and, a little bit like we were speaking with my coach, I don't want anyone to look at me and say, oh, I don't think I could be a leader because of how I see her. I would rather have them say, I know her strengths and weaknesses, and this is how she navigates leadership, and so this is how I know I can. And if she believes in me and sees me in that way, I absolutely know I can. That's one of the greatest gifts I can provide a graduating athlete, I think, is an expansion of what she thinks is possible for herself. And of course that is rooted in gender, because that's a major part of who she is. And so it's really important to me.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Yes. So last question, in addition to being a full-time Division I coach, you're also a doctoral student in the counselor education program here at UM. And I know that one of your interests is the intersection between coaching and motherhood. And you've mentioned being a mom, and that's part of your identity. What can you tell us about that piece of your life? Because really, if you look at it, it's like you have at least two full-time jobs. You've got this full-time job as a student, and especially at the doctoral level, that's just super demanding. And then you're the head coach of a Division I volleyball program. And then a family and kids and a whole other piece to you. And so where do you find the time?
Yeah, it hasn't been graceful. I think, back to the kind of collaborative model, like I need other people to be able to accomplish those dreams. I mean, it's been a dream of mine to be a doctoral student in my life at some point. And I wouldn't be able to do it without a partner at home, Nate. Shout out to Nate, and just incredible partner in that way, to be able to shoulder some extra things at home when I'm doing other things. And with my kids too, we openly talk about like, hey, I'm going to be really busy, and I know that's going to be hard on everybody. And have those kinds of conversations, and which is really excruciating. My kid's 9. It's not like they really understand.
Yes.
But just that we're teammates in a certain way. But yeah, I think I got into school thinking I really want to know, continuing education is very important to me, and we don't have a real formal coach's education sort of path. You reach a certain point, and then you're kind of just like, okay, do I read these books? Do I do this? Do I talk to other coaches? And I love talking to other coaches. And we also are so on our own little islands and our own little sport cultures and doing our thing that collaborating on that level is really hard, and takes a lot of extra effort. So I've always been kind of a student at heart. I've loved it. I really like the grind. I don't think you're like in athletics unless you love kind of this like I'm going to get up every day and I'm going to stretch myself in every way possible. And I think there's cost to that for sure.
Yeah.
That's not always a model that's great. I think we what's the word? Like celebrate it in ways that don't always highlight the costs of achievement in that way, or an achievement based mindset.
Because you gave something up.
You give something up.
Yeah.
Whether it's time, whether it's a part of yourself, whether it's
Another person or people.
Completely.
Yeah.
And I've struggled with that, and I've done that poorly at times, or run myself into the ground. But I have this curiosity about. I went into counselor education wanting to look at, okay, what is not the best, because I don't really believe there's the best, but what do athletes and coaches need relationally to bring the best out of each other? What does the research say? If it doesn't say anything, where do we need to look further? Because I think we're culturally, as sport coaches and as our athletes change, just as the generations change, they have different needs. And I do think, and they have different strengths. And I don't think it's okay to sit back and just say, kids these days are so, whatever we call them, weak, or I don't think people say snowflakes anymore. But there's those like, they're entitled, they're this, they're that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like tale as old as time. Older generations have said, these kids,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm guilty of that sometimes. There's generational differences, whatever. But I think more to the point is I love the college age population. I love humans at that age. There's just nothing better to me. They're amazing. And it's my job to not criticize their differences as I get older and they stay the same age, but to understand their needs, their strengths, all of that. So that's why I went into it. And I think counseling is the art of relating to other people, and I think so is coaching. And so what better way to improve my coaching skill than to actually work on myself as a human being, be able to listen better, be able to understand how people work, understand wellness and resilience. I think coaches now, like, I don't want to be my athlete's counselor. Like, well, neither do I. But I want to be someone who knows.
If I have to.
Yeah. And a lot of times you are the person they come to, not seeking counseling, but seeking a person on the other end of a struggle or a triumph. And so why wouldn't I want to be prepared for those moments and be the best helper that I can? And so that really drove me in. And then I think because of my own place in my own life, where I'm juggling raising kids and doing this thing, this program, and the struggles that I've encountered, and a little bit of the loneliness in that. I think there's some structural tough pinch points to having kids that need you to be around, and then being in a job and in a work environment that basically is like, there's no end to the amount you can be on the road, on your phone. Like, it just is, there's just never enough. You are just always in a deficit. And that's a hard place to be a parent from, because you need some reserves to go home and be present with your kids. And I know parents struggle with that, and I know mothers struggle with that. And then you have that compounded with the fact that there's not a lot of coaches that are women in coaching, and so you're at a minority status. And like I said, I'm a white woman in a heterosexual relationship. I can't imagine the obstacles for women that are single, that are in same-sex, partnerships, that are, racial minorities, those types of things. It just compounds from there.
Mm-hmm.
But you see a lot of women that are at my stage in life with family dropping out of coaching, because it's, I think, lonely, and there's not a lot of support. And I think because we are in a model that wasn't originally built for us, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
When the NCAA structurally was created. And so I think if you're in a job and you're in a career and you love it, then part of your job is to take the parts of it that you can and influence it and try to make it better for everybody. I would love for part of our team to feel like I want to be in coaching, and I see that as possible for me. And so that got me interested in coaching mothers and coaching parents. And, as people know that have children, your brain is split in two. You are in two places at once all the time. And yet you're in a career where total immersion is very much pressurized. Like, you kind of have to be in that mode.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there, like you were saying before, there is a real cost to being totally immersed in your coaching identity and then also trying to like flip into a parental identity and hold and do both those things well in a way that feels good, and then take care of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's possible. I'm curious about ways we can have more support. And I want our staff, Dana has 2 littler kids than I do, and I want to be able to help her navigate. She doesn't need my help, but I want to structurally be a piece that, not an obstacle,
Mm-hmm.
where she doesn't feel like she can go through her time where she can take maternity leave, where she can not be in the office as much and still feel like a legitimate, hardworking coach that is furthering her career if she wants to. So there's a lot of like systemic pieces and advocacy pieces that mean a lot to me too, even if I don't finish this project until forever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it feels very personal, which I think at this point in my education is what makes it feel really relevant. It's just it's in my heart, so I'm gonna get it done. I think if it was just any random topic, it would feel a little more arduous to stick with.
Well, good luck with that, because I know from experience, I guess, that when you get to that doctoral level and you're having to work on this dissertation project, your goal is to fill a gap.
Yeah.
Your goal is to contribute something because it's missing, and it sounds like there's a lot missing in that coaching motherhood kind of overlap. And so best of luck as you make a contribution to filling some of that gap.
Thank you.
All right. That's going to do it for this episode of the Montana Grizzly Leadership Project. Thanks again to Coach Lawrence for taking the time to come chat with us. We will catch you next time on the MGLP when we continue to discuss this fascinating topic of leadership with other members of the UM Athletic Department.